The most interesting tier of players in the NBA. Those that are great, but not quite great enough. We'll talk about those. Plus, Sarah Todd joins for part 2 of the interview. What's the Jazz starting five in March? And do they win 26, 36, or 46? It's all coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. Today, it's Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. We will look at Seth Partnow of the Athletics, top tier 3 players. These are players that rank, they're core players, but they're not the ones, according to Seth, that win you the title. They win you games, but they win you, what does he say? That the top players win you 3 times more games during playoffs than these players do. They're players that rank from like 19 to 39 in the NBA. And our Lauri Markkanen is particularly interesting inside of this list. Then Sarah Todd will join us. We'll continue our interview conversation. We'll look at the Jazz starting lineup in March. We'll look at 26, 36, or 46 wins, plus some Walker and some Lowry conversation. As I mentioned, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. We are free. We are available on all podcasting apps. We're on YouTube. Please give us a 5-star review. They're greatly appreciated. I'll start shouting you out if you do. And join the conversation either by hitting me on Twitter /X at DLock09 or comment in the YouTube. I've had a nice time going through. You've seen my thumbs up and my hearts to all your comments. They're out there. Other than the ones that say I'm unbearable, but I am generally unbearable. So I actually don't disagree with that guy from the other day. I do want to start the show on a serious note. In 1994, so 4 or 5, probably 5, I got offered the job as the program director of what was going to be the brand new radio station, 1320 KFan. I was 25 years old. I didn't have a beeping clue what I was doing. I actually turned down the job, and then the guy who hired me, Scott Mahalik, kind of told me, like, I hire talent, I'll give you experience. And Randy Rodgers, who was a really good mentor at the time, told me I thought I could do it. I only took the job under one circumstance, and that was that this other young person named Kevin Graham would join me as the assistant program director. We went on to monstrous success, partially, largely, maybe entirely, because the Jazz went to the NBA Finals twice, the Utes went to the Final Four, and BYU went to the Cotton Bowl. We were the number 1 rated sports station in the country. My show was the number 1 rated sports show, and it propelled my career kind of to where it is probably today without that. And so Kevin Graham has been my longest running confidant, friend, incredibly integral in the building of Locked On, consulted for us for a while, and has done amazing work. He stepped away. He's the best sports program director in the country. His resume is amazing. He was the reason we were good at 1320 KFan. I got the credit because my name was the program director and he was assistant, but he was the reason. Don't kid yourself. And so he went on to go to New York and Boston and Detroit, and he's most recently been at my dream station, KNBR, in San Francisco. And yesterday he stepped away because he's battling bladder cancer. And I just want to shout out, first of all, we'll see what he does next. It was time to get away from the stress and to get healthy. And he's 52 years old, so he shouldn't be dealing with cancer. Cancer sucks. 5 for the fight. So I just want to give a shout out to KG to open the show. And if you get a minute and you're an old time Salt Lake sports listener, you know Kevin well. His Twitter account is KGraham Sports. I think this is an important day for him because I think it's smart that he steps away from the stress to get healthy. I also think it's a hard day for him because this is what he's done forever. And so I think some thanks and support from all of us in the Locked On Jazz family to a guy who's been an integral part of Utah Sports Talk Radio would be wonderful. KGraham Sports. All right. So that was the serious note. Now let's get into the geeky NBA stuff. So this is like one of my most favorite conversations in the NBA. And that is these players that Seth Partnow on The Athletic, Partnow, an old analytics NBA guy who writes and also does a bunch of work for Dunked On. It's his tier 3 players. We've been doing the tiers for the week, and I've kind of stepped away from it. Tier 3 players. And, he says, hey, tier 1 has 3 times the impact of these players. So these are all the players that are great, but not quite great enough. And it's so interesting to me, and this is where I think championships are so hard and winning so hard and trying to get the right combination is almost impossible. So because all of these players have something, and then they have a little twist that's just not quite enough. And then you probably have to get what they really need to become is one of those tier 1 or 2 players has to suddenly couple with one of these players. And then you start to win a championship. But these players are players who believe they probably can carry you to a championship, which makes that a very interesting little dance. So he has them down in A, B, and C. And tier C, 3C is really interesting. They're great. Rudy Gobert, great, but right? Like great. Bradley Beal, great, but hasn't played a meaningful game in years, and now will be the third dog on the team, and that's probably the answer. DeRozan, unbelievable clutch shooter, mid-range maven. You just can't really win with him. Like win. Like you can win. He's good. He's great. Like to say you can't win with him sounds so cruel and brutal, but to win a championship or be a Final Four, I always say you got to be a Final Four in the conference team. Like, and then you're 2 sprained ankles away from the NBA Finals or ball bounce or Kawhi Leonard bounce. LaMelo Ball. And I said this about LaMelo Ball last year. Like, I love him. I was in love with him his rookie year. In his second year, he left me with like it's a really interesting year to watch him. Mikal Bridges and Tyrese Halliburton. Halliburton and Bridges are interesting because they're, along with one other player who we know well, is the only one in this group who I actually think can jettison themselves maybe into a better group, into this tier 1 or 2. Like there's a chance Halliburton can make that next step. I think he's probably peaked, and there's a chance Mikal Bridges can get there, but I think he's probably peaking this next year, but we'll see. 3B is players who Seth says probably should be higher on the list, but for some reason. So Trae Young and Kyrie Irving, they've got trust issues that make you kind of wonder. Then you have an aging group of Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Draymond Green. Then Pascal Siakam to me is the next Andrew Wiggins, Aaron Gordon. Really, and Siakam's better than either Aaron Gordon or Andrew Wiggins was in their spots. But Siakam's being asked to be the number 1 guy in Toronto. He's going to want a max contract. He's probably best if he slides into where Andrew Wiggins did with the Warriors or Aaron Gordon did with Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic, if he's going to kind of have that championship impact. But if he's your guy, it's not quite enough. One of the debates I've had about us is if we could go get Siakam in the offseason and you put Siakam and Lowry together, like that's 2 guys in this group, is what does that do for you? Can you go with 2 guys in this group? And you really have to have one in the top tier? And the probably answer is yes. Zion Williamson, just out of note. Jalen Brunson, brilliant, but just the size. And then he gets to Lowry. And what's so interesting to me about Lowry is the one fit because of his physical presence, his array of skills, who I actually think can vault. Like, of the guys we've talked about, Rudy Gobert, Bradley Beal, DeMar DeRozan, Mikal Bridges, Tyrese Halliburton, I left one out, Trae Young, Kyrie Irving, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Draymond Green, Pascal Siakam, Zion Williamson, Jalen Brunson. Do any of those vault? So I think LaMelo Ball might be able to vault. Tyrese Halliburton might be able to vault. More likely that LaMelo Ball does. Zion gets healthy if he might be able to vault, but he is such a defensive disaster. But Lowry, 7'1", 240, shooting. If he starts to pass a little bit more and create for his teammates, if he can get a little bit more one-on-one, he's got a vault in him. The next group, which is 3A, which is 19 through about 25 on the list of players, is pretty fascinating. It's Bam Adebayo. Probably needs somebody else. Pretty great. Needs somebody else. Jaylen Brown. Anthony Edwards could vault. Steve Kerr just came out the other day, said he's the man on that national team. We'll see. I think he'll propel himself dramatically. I think Minnesota has a really good year. I think it becomes clear he's the guy. Karl Anthony Towns is less of a distraction. Talking to Rudy, he believes in Anthony Edwards. So Bam Adebayo, Jaylen Brown, Jaren Jackson Jr., Anthony Edwards, De'Aaron Fox, Donovan Mitchell. And we've talked a little bit about this group for the everydayers earlier this year. Like, can Anthony Edwards, can De'Aaron Fox, can Donovan Mitchell get themselves into this group of top 9, 10 players? When we looked at the top 9 players in the NBA, those were the guys that won, right? You got the list. Giannis, Luka, Jimmy Butler was 9. Like, those are the guys that win. Jokic. And so can Jaylen Brown and Bam Adebayo, I don't think they have the game to go take the next jump. But can a Donovan, can a Jalen Brunson maybe, who's frankly was as good as Donovan last year? And Donovan was great. Can Anthony Edwards, size? Yes. Can De'Aaron Fox take another step? Can Jaren Jackson add something else to who he is as a player offensively, not just defense? He's good enough offensively. He's not hurting you. He's got that jump shot and got some things that Rudy doesn't have while being the Rudy level defender, defensive player of the year last year. I love this group. I think this is the most interesting group in the NBA. And from our standpoint, I think Lowry, like when you take, if you go look at 19 through 40s, which this is, 20 players, and you say, which of these guys is most likely to vault into the top 15, into tier 1 and 2, and we'll look at tier 1 and 2 on tomorrow's show. Who's most likely to go there? I might take Lowry. Physical size matters so much at 7'1". Anthony Edwards would probably, because of physical size, would be the other. So Anthony Edwards 1, Lauri Markkanen 2, if I had to find a player in that group who I thought could take the vault. Who do you think? Let me know. Hit me on Twitter at DLock09. Hit me on YouTube on that. Sarah Todd's hanging out, ready to come by to join us next here on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Chevy, located in Woods Cross, also in Logan. The Chevy lineup of trucks, there's Chevy. There's nothing else like it. It's simply Americana. It's the Colorado and the Silverado and the all-new electric Silverados coming out. So stop by. If you're in the market for an SUV, the SUV lineup is incredible, all the way up to the well-known Tahoe and the Suburbans with the Blazer and the Trailblazer and the Equinox. And then, of course, you've got the Corvette, and the new electric Volt is taking people by storm. It's all at Murdoch Chevy. The Murdoch's been in Utah for over 80 years, giving you the no-regrets experience. So stop by Murdoch Chevy today in Woods Cross or in Logan, but please email me first at dlock09@gmail.com. That's dlock09@gmail.com if you're going to stop by and join. Today's show is also brought to you by Ibotta. This is such an interesting kind of way to add a little bit cash back. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, all the way so you can make sure you're beating inflation every little bit you possibly can. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user is saving $120 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, a concert ticket, something great fun, or you could use the cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you've been denying to go to, or that fancy dinner you're craving. Other apps give you points but don't amount to much. With Ibotta, you get real cash back, and you can cash out in your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands, realtors too, when you start with Ibotta. So right now, Ibotta is offering Locked On Jazz listeners $5 for trying Ibotta. Use the code LOCKED when you register. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the App Store and Google Play. IBOTTA, code LOCKED to get $5 off. Today's show also brought to you by our good friends over at Birddogs. The most comfortable short you'll ever wear. You don't need another short if you've got Birddogs. And now it has become my go-to short. We were just in Nebraska, and it was so darn hot and awful and brutal. But the Birddogs worked. And one of the things that Birddog talks about is kind of the no-stink liner. That was so clutch. The anti-stink sweat wicking factor that keeps you cool all day long. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Birddog, because that was brutal. It was like 103 and humid. It felt like 110. I'm surprised my daughter didn't want to come home. Birddogs fixed the issue. They've invented the knit fabric that looks like khaki but stretches to give you the slimmer fit, and then the anti-stink sweat wicking fabric. It's all great. Go out there and find out about the most comfortable short you can find. Go to birddogs.com, Locked On NBA, enter the promo code Locked On NBA for a white tech hat. That's a free white tech hat. If you watch our college previews, it's all over the place on those. That's birddog.com/Locked On NBA or promo code Locked On NBA for a free white tech hat. You won't want it take your Birddogs off. I promise you, go check it out today at birddogs.com/lockedonnba. Sarah Todd joins us on the show, and college football previews are out across Locked On. Pac-12, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC previews are out, and they're all outstanding. So make sure you go grab them today. Day 2 was Sarah Todd, and she closed day 1 with a dagger. We've also changed uniforms today. Purple is back. So you dropped this little dagger, like when you would start Chris Dunn, and then I said, so your rotation, if you missed it, go back to yesterday's show, is then Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson. And I, by the way, kind of feel like the Jazz have to have either Jordan Clarkson or Colin Sexton on the floor for all 48 minutes. Like somebody's got to be on the floor to break down score. And then you said, well, unless they trade Colin Sexton. So let me ask you this question. What is your Jazz starting 5 on March 1st?
Oh, that one's more difficult to answer. Locke, very good one. I think that it depends on what they see out of Keontae through the rest of the season. Like if he kind of earns his spot. I think I don't know. I tell people not to overreact or overanalyze Summer League, but then I watch Keontae George play in Summer League, and I'm like, he's got it. So I don't know whether or not he's going to be able to kind of show enough and earn minutes to be a starting guard in year 1. Again, this is a question of what do I think is going to be the starting 5 and who do I think should be the starting 5? Because at this, like, even if that happens and Keontae looks good in year 1, like I still think Chris Dunn is the best point guard on this team right now. And so that should be the case. That being said, like it looks a lot different because there's still a potential for Jordan Clarkson to be traded, for Colin Sexton to be traded. Like this roster could look a lot different on March 1st. And so that definitely, if those guys are off the team and what they get back in a trade could be, I'm not good at speculating that wildly.
Sure, right.
But that could give room for Ochai to take a starting position, for there to be movement we still don't know what Taylor Hendricks and Bryce Sensabaugh are going to look like, right? And so we don't know if it's going to be like John Collins and Taylor Hendricks or Taylor Hendricks and then John Collins. Because I think that Taylor Hendricks is probably going to be very good. And after a few months of like putting on some weight in an NBA training room, maybe he earns some starting minutes. So March 1st is really difficult.
Pre-John Collins acquisition and I actually probably was talking about this pre-draft. Like, I thought there was a real chance that by March 1st, your starting lineup was whoever you drafted as your point guard, Ochai Agbaji, Lauri Markkanen, whoever you drafted as your power forward, and Walker Kessler. So that we now know those names. Those now are Keontae George. I mean, I said this long before the draft.
The oldest player on the starting unit would be Lauri Markkanen.
And then you're just not winning games if you look. And my point actually, when I was saying this, was that I actually thought this might be the best thing for the organization. Right? This was all stemming off when people would say, "Look, oh my gosh, what an incredible year! What do you think we're going to do next year?" And I'd be like, "Well, it might be 26."
Yeah.
This is how it would be 26. Now that might be different now with the acquisition of John Collins, because I'm not sure. Like I still see him in that mix and things like that. So we'll get to Lowry and Walker in a second. As I said, what is your thought? 26 wins, 36 wins, or 46 wins? If you had to I'm going to take you to Vegas. I just gave you 10 poker chips. Like you're going to move them on 26, 36, or 46 on the purple roulette wheel. Where are you putting your chips?
I'd probably put them on 36.
All of them?
Yeah.
Or distribute them.
I'd probably put them all on 36.
Because you're a gambler. You want to win all. Like you're just going all in. There's no chance that you're going to walk out of the roulette table only winning 40% of your money. You're like, I'm all in for my 100% of my money.
Yeah, it depends on what my odds are, what the 46 looks like. Like if that's going to be a good
return.
They're
all even odds. They're all even odds. You put
even
one
odds.
In, get it back.
Even odds, then I'm putting 9 on 36 and 1 on 46.
Okay. Give me your 46 scenario.
My 46 scenario is that the Jazz don't make huge moves. They make fringe moves through the rest of the season. And so you, for the majority, have this team and that chemistry is going to win out. And you see big jumps from guys like Ochai and Walker.
Okay.
And then, and at 46, also, I think you're looking at a situation where you could, let's see, 46 wins. You might still be in the play-in at that point, right?
Yeah, I do think that we've done this. Like we've taken the top and brought it down and brought the bottom up. So I do think like no one's winning unless the Suns regular season team is just so good that they're going to win 60. I think your best win is 54. So if you look at last year, the 6th seed was 45 and 44. So I think 46 gets you into the top 6.
The 6th seed last year was 45. Okay.
In the 2 different conferences.
Oh man. All right. Well then, yeah, I was thinking about that differently. 46 is rough. Yeah, but I still think like the best case scenario for them to get 46 is just like you have to, Lowry has the same kind of season. Walker continues to show out. Ochai pops off the page and you get really lucky with continuity. Jordan Clarkson has another year. I mean, his best year of his career was probably last season.
Right.
And so
or the perfect evolution to the next step of his career, right? Like he played a certain way as a young player, then he became a 6-man bench player, then Quinn let him loose, and then he evolved back to kind of where he started as a rookie point guard with the Lakers. Like kind of an interesting circle. And I think him playing in the I think these guys playing as the go-to guy in these settings and these is so good for them. Like this would be great for him. Like, for all we know, like Will has said to Jordan, like, hey, you're my starting point guard next year. Like, think about that when you're in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Now he's not passing to Lauri Markkanen or Walker Kessler.
Right.
Let's go to Lowry. He is call him the 20th best player in the NBA. He might be 16th, 17th. Like he just barely missed all NBA, so we can go top 20. What do you think has to happen for him to get to, like, if I say 9, that's in the group. Right. Jimmy Butler's the 9th best player in the NBA right now, probably. Right. So that's in the group. So that 9, 10, 11, 12, like he's in the group. The guys that like he's on your roster, you're winning 45 to 50 games because he's on your roster. He's that good. What has to happen for Lowry to do that?
Yeah, I think we talked about that all last season, that Lowry has to take more upon himself. Like he already said that he was trying and slowly becoming a little bit more of a vocal leader, though he prefers to be leader by example, right? But that all kind of comes together with also just like taking yours when you see it when you're on the floor. And we saw a lot more of that with Lowry last season than we did in any of his previous seasons at any other stops. But like, if you're going to be one of those guys, top 12, right? Like if you're going to be in that group, like there has to be a point where you are appropriately selfish.
Do you think he has the skill? I'm 15 feet out. Give me the ball. And I'm scoring on this beep to beep.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he's a lot stronger than I think that anyone really thinks he is. And I don't think that he uses it enough. Like he has some real strength and we'll see what he looks like. I mean, he's doing military training and then getting ready for FIBA stuff. So like, who knows what he's going to really look like? I mean, watching some stuff, some of the FIBA action, it's hard to really tell until you like get up close and see a guy, like if he's gained strength or lost fat or what's he been doing, to his body. But he's so strong. He's 7 feet tall. He's strong.
You're right there. Like, I think like this might be one where the fact that we are of different genders allows us to make a different comment here. And I silly enough can get away with this. Like, so I'll never forget last year when he walked in the room and I was like,
yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is an Adonis. Like he's 7'1", he's ripped, he's 240, he can move like a 6'1" guy. Like I couldn't believe what, like the first thing that like the whole book on him was that he was soft, right?
Right.
And then and you didn't really like, I've never bought books on players like that whole kind of, that's the other one. Like, okay, great. Let me see if this is really true. And when he walked in, I'll never forget that. We had a meeting on media day with them. We hadn't seen him yet. And he walked in and I was just like, oh my gosh. And then you like just got used to being in elevators with him and around and walking by him. He's mammoth. And he is truly like, he is Michelangelo's David. Like he is absolutely.
He's jacked. He's so jacked.
Every way.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I do think he is. Like, how does he learn how to use that? Right. Like,
Right.
and I think it's learning how to play in fewer dribbles. Right. So he had like Will talked about, like, it's 7-1, you put on the deck, it's got a long way to go. And we watched him try to get lower and lower on the year. Can you do that in 3 bounces? Can you do it in 2 bounces? Because when he goes to 5 and spins,
Yeah, and I think, he mentioned, working on his handles a little bit more in the off season. And so I think that it'd be great for him to, get a little bit more control. So right, like exactly as you said, like after the 5th or 6th bounce, like he still has the same control that he did on the 1st or 2nd. That would be great. That being said, like I think that it's such a mental thing with him, right? Like if you're down there and you see like I can take this guy, like the Lowry that we have right now is a little bit more passive. I think maybe 20% of the time he takes that guy. And that's being said, the other 80% of the time, like he probably makes a really great pass and like tries to get someone open or like does a good move, kind of collapses the defense. Like he's not a stupid player. But I think that there just needs to be a little bit of an uptick where 60% of the time he takes that guy.
It might be appropriate that we're in the about 30 minutes of this week-long interview with Sarah Todd, and we mentioned the word pass for the first time on this roster. More with Sarah Todd coming up. We'll talk about Walker Kessler's progression. Who's her most intriguing player? I think she actually teased it in yesterday's show of the player she's most intrigued by this season. But that's all coming up as we continue on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel. NFL season is here. Lots of fun to be had. Here's the deal. This is a pretty good one for you right now. You can go and pick your Super Bowl winner. And then every time your Super Bowl winner wins a game, you get a bonus bet in for the season. So you go pick your Super Bowl winner and you get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Any Super Bowl winner. You can go Chiefs. You can go Niners. Sarah, I think, would go Niners. Sarah, Niners fan, right?
Packers.
Right? Oh, really? Oh, Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Are you picking them as your FanDuel Super Bowl winner?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's just a loyal fan right there. There's no logic involved in that at all, but we'll
Yeah.
go with it. So anyway, go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn and start getting your bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can go to FanDuel. You also can probably bet the NBA play-in tournament and all of those things as well now. You can bet Rookie of the Year. Oh, that one's pretty easy unless you got a surprise pick. All of those at FanDuel. The NBA prop bets are up. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On, as well as the answer for your Super Bowl winner, and get your bonus bets every time you win in the regular season. She is the Utah Sports Writer of the Year. She's Sarah Todd of the Deseret News. Nice enough to spend the week with us here on this. All right, I need to figure this out. I'm flummoxed a little bit. Unless it's an Aaron Rodgers thing from Paradise, California, is where I believe Sarah grew up, if I've got her bio right. Is that an Aaron Rodgers thing because of his Butte time and all that your Packers love, or is that from something else?
That was a great perk and something that was it just fit right into my life, already being a Packers fan. And like I went to Butte College. My family knows Aaron. And so like it was really nice when I was worried that the 49ers were going to draft him. And so it was really nice that happened. That being said, I'm happy that he's not on the team now. I'd rather not be an Aaron Rodgers fan. So,
quick question, non-sports related.
Yeah.
Paradise, California is the place that had the worst fire of all time until 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
What's been kind of any thoughts or just anything you'd share from that perspective of knowing a whole community that's lived through this, of what's happening in Lahaina?
Yeah. It is very different to put your hometown in the past tense. And that's not something that a lot of people deal with, like you move away, or maybe there's like a flood or something. But having it completely wiped out and destroyed and just not even be a thing anymore is not something that I wish on anybody. And I will just tell people, anybody that is going through it or knows someone, in Lahaina or anywhere else where wildfires or fire has devastated someone's life, like you really, really learn to appreciate the non-tangible things in your life. Like it becomes so important how much people mean and how much the memories with those people mean and how much um, items don't mean anything to you. And so for anyone just remember that like none of the things that you could hold in your hands really actually meant anything. It was the feeling that you got when you held those things in your hands, and you still have those feelings.
Interesting, super interesting. Good thoughts. And an interesting. We could do more on this, but I think people want NBA, so we'll stay on what we are. But it's interesting because Lahaina obviously will be rebuilt because of its location, whereas Paradise seemingly.
Paradise is slowly being rebuilt. I mean, my my brother rebuilt a house in Paradise, and so I go back there every year. But it's very strange because like you can rebuild as much as you want, but if you walk through a place and like there's no tree line where there used to be, like it just doesn't feel the same.
And there's also no like soul or fabric. Like one of the most interesting places I've ever. This may or may not relate, and I apologize if this somehow captures incorrectly. One of the most interesting places I've ever been in my life is Saigon. And what was noticeable to me at the time when I was there was I guess it was Ho Chi Minh City by the time I was there, there was no texture because it had been invaded by so many different people and lived in. So you had a French section and you had a US, but there was no, I thought it was great. I kind of loved it. There was something fabulous to the energy that existed at the time, but the soul or the fabric of the place didn't feel like you would if you were in, I would guess, somewhere in Europe that's been around for equally as long a period of time, but been not occupied. And so I think a little bit of what you're saying is like this was occupied by a fire and changed. There's the texture, the soul, the fabric of what was Paradise, what was Lahaina will never be felt that same way by new people. Maybe by those who once had felt it will still be able to feel it again. So
yeah, it's really difficult, really weird experience and really scary. I just hope that everybody is able to find their loved ones.
Yeah, no, all right. Hard transition. So let's go to something super important like Walker. And the Walker might be the only person in the world we know who could make us laugh right after something like that. Cause he's
right.
Let me ask you this question about Walker. He's really bright. Like I believe humor is a sign of intelligence. How much do you think that's going to help?
Incredibly self-deprecating.
How much do you think that's going to help him though, in this process of how mature, smart, put together? I feel like, it's interesting. Like his brother was valedictorian. He was like, whatever. I don't know these things because I was never close to them. Like saluted to one below that. Right. His dad's I think an emergency room doctor is like, right. His brother's actually now a lawyer. Like it's like, and he just happens to be 7'1". So he's got like, and he seemed to have a pretty good support system with Austin this year. It's just feels like a lot of the intangible things are lined up for him to make a jump this year. What's your feeling from your 12 years, I think it is in the NBA, on like how much that matters? Like you saw Joel Embiid, who might have, or not Joel Embiid, Jahlil Okafor, I think when you were in Philadelphia, who might have been the exact opposite. Like in my memory is his support system was a disaster. Right. So what's your feeling on like how much this stuff matters?
Yeah, the support system thing, that's huge. And I think what's also like a part of that, a really interesting tiny little piece is that a lot of in these professional athletes, like they'll have huge support systems. They'll have a lot of people around them, but the the type of people and what the people are willing to say is probably the more important thing. Because you can have a lot of people around you just saying yes and like boosting you up and like hyping you up all the time. And that's fine. And that'll get you to a certain point. It'll probably get you to the NBA. But then once you're there, like you have to realize that yes is not always the answer that you need. And that propping you up when you don't need it is not the best either. Like your ego needs to be checked. And so if you have people around you that are willing to check your ego and willing to say no to you and willing to bring you back down to earth, that's probably more important than just having a lot of people. Because if you got like 3 people that'll do that, that's better than having 20 when none of them will.
It's interesting. The 2 worst I've ever seen, and I'm going to leave names out just because what's the value, frankly, was one that's the traditional kid who the family's just pulling out. Like he literally buys a house in a city and then he actually moves out because they're just taking so much from him that he actually goes into an apartment while they live in the, they live in the mansion and they destroy it. Like it was just a disaster.
Yep.
The other one was where the dad was the coach throughout high school and never stopped, literally sat in the front row, and didn't, and never, and literally was coaching him after every game still in the NBA. So you can have this bad on both ends of the spectrum is I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think, and not all stories, because Jordan Clarkson's a great example of like what you're talking about, where like the dad was the coach, right? But went in the complete opposite direction, where like Mike Clarkson knows when to step back and knows when to like insert himself into Jordan's life and cares deeply. And Jordan would tell you that his dad is his hero. And so Jordan has like a very, very good support system of people like Mark who like wouldn't tell him yes all the time. He would absolutely tell him no. Like anyone who knows Mike Clarkson is like, he's not going to sugarcoat anything. And so that's a great example of that, where like every situation is different depending on the person.
All right. Walker Kessler's next steps. What do you see? What are the keys?
I know that a lot of people, probably a lot of Jazz fans, are like interested in him like exploring an outside game. I am absolutely not interested in that. Like I don't think that Will Hardy is interested in that, right? Like if I'm Will Hardy, what I'm telling him is like, listen, if you continue to make them at 33%, then you're allowed to take one every 5 games. Like I'm not opening the gate all the way. I think that the next steps for him are he has to be able to deal with craftier guards who are going to come at him and try to expose him. Like Dame absolutely wrecked him last year. And those kinds of guys are going to continue to come after him if he continues to have these block numbers and continues to have like people look at his defensive game so much. There are plenty of games in the season where it's not just going to be about game plan, but point of pride, and people are going to come straight for him. And so he needs to deal with that. She's Sarah Todd, Deseret News writer, NBA Utah Sportscaster of the Year. The most intriguing player. We didn't get to it. We'll get to it on Friday's show. It's next. It's coming on Friday. Sarah Todd's with us. Thank you to Everydayers. Thank you for making it the first listen. It is Locked on Jazz, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.